mamas, welcome to Fall into High School and Beyond. Jessyka Coulter here, the CEO and founder of Ace Cookie Tutoring and your summit hostess. At this event, we're empowering your teens to learn beyond today, and helping us do that is Jill Stowell. She is the founder and executive director of Stowell Learning Centers. So Jill, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Jessica. I'm excited about this event.
Yeah, I love having you back. I don't know if our mamas know, but this is actually our second interview. So I don't even know if I remember, Jill, exactly if we talked about dyslexia last time or not, but I'm excited to talk because you had so many awesome things to share. And I know our mamas are definitely listening and going, oh, tell me more about this dyslexia. Like, what does it mean? Like, what does it look like? And then I know we're going to dive into really how we help. So Jill, what do we need to know even to start the conversation?
Well, just so that you kind of know where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
In our centers, we help children, teens, and adults eliminate struggles associated with learning disabilities and dyslexia. And that is not the same as workarounds or coping strategies. I remember a mom calling us shortly after she'd had a meeting at school. And at school, they were going to give her son lots of accommodations, which is a good thing. But she called and she was so frustrated. And she said, I don't want my son accommodated. And I get that because accommodations are not a long-term solution. They are helpful. They're just not a long-term solution. The real problem for learning disabilities and dyslexia is weak or inefficient underlying skills that are getting in the way, kind of being roadblocks to students being able to learn as comfortably and easily as they could. And so to permanently change that, you have to identify and develop the lagging underlying skills so that the brain is getting the information that it needs to learn independently and comfortably. So we have 4 centers in Southern California, and we work remotely with students wherever they are, but that is really our focus. And so dyslexia is one of my favorite topics, but I'm always coming from that standpoint of understanding the thinking style and then what can we do to make it easier.
And I love that you're going for eliminating and not just putting the Band-Aid on, because I feel like that's what I do too as a study skills tutor. Is it's like, okay, your teen doesn't love to learn. Well, it's because he doesn't know how to learn. Why does he not know how to learn? Because he's never been taught how to learn through study skills. It's very, very similar. It's just a different matter of what are we helping with? What are we kind of, like you said, building those skills?
Right. Always getting underneath the symptoms that we're seeing to the real root of the problem so that it's sustainable.
Exactly. I think that we've got some mamas listening who'd be very interested to know kind of how you do that, Jill, because I feel like saying you can get rid of or, help kind of, remove dyslexia in a way, I feel like that's a big order. So I'm curious, I mean, what's the first step? I mean, how does that even work?
I recognize that is a very, very bold statement. And I feel really comfortable with that because first of all, there's a lot of brain research to back it up. And it's hard for me to believe this, but this is our 40th year. So we have been focusing on this population for a very long time. If you interviewed people on the street, I'm sure at least 9 out of 10 would say that dyslexia is a permanent condition. But decades of brain research and clinical evidence show that that's not really true. Dyslexia is really interesting because it's a thinking style. So it actually has some really, really big strengths associated with it, as well as, of course, the challenges with reading, writing, and spelling. And so the trick is, we don't want to eliminate those strengths. Those are amazing, those talents. But we want to figure out what is it that's keeping this bright, creative, talented individual from being able to read and spell as easily as they could. And so I think one of the easiest analogies I can give is kind of thinking like learning kind of like a ladder.
Mhm.
And, you know, if you're doing a job at the top of a ladder, you want to know that those rungs on the ladder are secure and stable so that you feel really comfortable putting all your focus on that job up there and doing your best. Well, if you think of reading, writing, spelling, math, all the academic subjects as sitting up there at the top of the ladder, and that's where kids have to work. And the rungs are like the underlying skills that support effective learning, things that we don't really teach or think about very much, but like memory, attention, auditory and visual processing, which isn't your hearing and your seeing, but how the brain actually perceives and thinks about information that comes in through the eyes and the ears. So those kinds of skills are actually the rungs on the ladder. And for the dyslexic student, those auditory and visual processing rungs are usually not very stable. They actually think differently, they process that information differently. And so it just causes everything to be harder and take longer, even if they can read. And so if we really want to correct the challenges, then we have to really look at the auditory processing, the visual processing, what is going on there, and develop those underlying skills. More reading is just not going to do the trick. You got to get underneath the problem.
Wow. I'm fascinated, Jill, to hear that the auditory is not as strong in our dyslexic learners, because for me, when I work with dyslexic students, I've noticed that a lot of teens are very auditory. That seems to be kind of, you mentioned coping mechanisms, that seems to be what works for them, is they're like, okay, I can't read it myself, but I've learned to get really good at hearing someone else say it, because that's the only way I'm ever really going to get the chance to get the material if they don't know how to read themselves.
Absolutely. And that is actually something that we see all the time with dyslexia, is that because there's different pieces of auditory processing, but they do tend to have good comprehension. If you read it to them or you tell them, they get it. And that's one of the things that is so confusing about dyslexic students is, you know, they really get it. And so it just kind of looks like when they don't do their assignments, when they don't do well on tests, it may look like they're just not studying or they're not trying, they're not that motivated. But the truth is, the reading is getting in the way. And even if they're reading, I'm sure you run into some of these kids that they can read it, but it's so taxing. It takes so much mental energy, or they have to read it over and over and over. I remember very early in my practice, I met a neurosurgeon who talked about how when he was in medical school, he didn't realize that he was dyslexic, but he had to spend like 5 or 6 times longer studying than anyone else in his class. And so, yeah, sometimes they can do it, but the cost is phenomenal. If, you know, as long as they're compensating for that issue.
Mm-hmm. I think about my own sister, that she's not dyslexic, but if you have her just look at letters, like have her kind of go through like a deck of flashcards of just letters, she can't tell you hardly any of them. And so what her kind of coping mechanism has been to increase her vocab. And like, it's kind of crazy cool how well she reads and just how long she's read at the level she has. And it was just a matter of her learning, well, this sort of letter goes with this sort of letter, and these are my options, and this is the only thing that makes sense in this sentence. It's incredible.
It is incredible. That's one of the things about dyslexic learners is they are incredible compensators. They know what they are supposed to do. They know how it's supposed to look, and they figure it out. And even what you're describing there, yeah, she's got a good vocabulary. She's filling in the gaps all the time, and it's working.
Mm-hmm.
It might be a little stressful
Oh,
on her
yes.
end,
I think so. That's very true.
but she's making it work.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Now I'm wondering, I'm thinking, Jill, we're talking back to school here, and you mentioned the idea of, coping mechanisms. We're talking about accommodations. So if we're in this back to school kind of trying to figure out how do I help my kid that is dyslexic, I mean, are there things that our mamas need to know? Are there things they can do to help? I mean, obviously it'd be wonderful if every one of them, right, would come and learn these skills that are missing, but kind of in the meantime, what are our options? I mean, what do you recommend?
I have a couple of things. I think, first of all, if you're a parent, period, but especially a parent of a teen, you have to listen. You have to listen to them. Um, and especially if they're struggling, if you are seeing that your teen gets, let's say, they're just not passing their tests, or they're really resistant to any kind of homework that involves a lot of reading and writing, we're really good at just coming up with solutions. Oh, well, try this, or you need to do this, or you've got to start your homework right as soon as you get home from school, whatever. We're good at coming up with solutions, but our teens, especially, they really want to be independent. They want to come up with ideas on their own. And we as parents and educators, we just have to keep in mind, whatever we see, there's a reason for it. There's a reason. So if your child is resisting, if they're doing poorly on tests, ask gently with no judgment, and then listen. So you might say something like, hey, it seems like there's something hard about tests. Tell me about that. And they're not automatically going to know, but whatever they say, you just be interested, flesh it out a little bit, because you may find that they just can't take the time to read carefully because they won't finish.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, that's a red flag that's going to help us recognize that there's something more going on than they just aren't studying. Or, hey, I notice reading and writing assignments seem to take a really long time. What do you think is going on there? And then secondly, that just sort of gives you an avenue to explore with your child and start to together figure out what's going on and come up with solutions. And then secondly, if you think that your child might be dyslexic, and especially if you have a family history of dyslexia and your child is struggling, I would encourage you to get testing. It used to be really, really hard to find anybody that does dyslexia testing, but a lot of schools do now. That's become more mandated by the states in the last several years. But get testing, and then together learn everything you can about dyslexia, or about whatever their specific neurodiverse thinking style is. Validate the strengths. I mean, with dyslexia, you often see good comprehension. You often see real intuitive, high emotional intelligence, where they just really get how other people are feeling. You see creative arts, lots of actors and artists and entrepreneurs and people who think out of the box and have these out of the box problem solving abilities. Well, validate those things. Look at what your child is really good at and help them see, wow, because you are dyslexic or have a dyslexic thinking style, you also have these really cool things that you can think about and do. Also explore the challenges and what they need in order to be successful. If they feel like, man, if I just had, an extra time on my test, I could do better. Great. Now we understand that, and they can, advocate for that. I know parents tend to be a little afraid of labels, and I don't think anybody should be put in a box of a label, but sometimes it's helpful. I find our students are actually kind of relieved to know that there is something. I remember a high school boy who came in for testing. The testing was really hard. He was reading about a sixth grade level, so he could read, but it was hard. But at the end, I talked to him about what I saw, and he was so excited. I mean, he was almost skipping out of there because it was like, I'm dyslexic. There's a reason why this is hard. It's not because I'm dumb. It's not my fault. And so there is a lot of value to knowing and understanding and figuring out what you need.
I love what you just said, Jill. The idea of knowing that that teen isn't dumb, because it's like mom knew, you knew, but did that kid himself believe it until he really learned what was essentially wrong with him, even though there wasn't anything
Right.
wrong with him. Yeah.
Right.
Wow. Ugh. I just love those light bulb moments. It's one of those cool things about what you get to do and what I get to do is we get to see a teen struggling, and then all of a sudden we teach them the skills that they're missing. And it's like, oh yeah, this can be easy if you know what you need to know about what you don't know. Exactly.
Right. Exactly.
Oh,
Yeah.
man. Well, I'm looking at our time going, Jill, should we jump into your freebie? But I'm thinking, I know we've also got mamas that are listening, like you said, that might be dyslexic. And then we might also have mamas that have older kiddos. So I'm wondering for any of our listeners, any teens that, are kind of in that, about to be on their own stage, whether it's college or beyond, I wonder, is there anything we should talk about, anything about dyslexia in the real world? Because I'm thinking, we put a dyslexic kid at a job, and maybe we have some coping strategies, but maybe we still haven't gotten that far. Is there anything real world application we should talk about?
I mean, of course, my heart says go after the issue and get underneath it and correct those challenges, because life is easier when that happens. But in addition to that, school is a hard place for dyslexic students. And I don't think that anybody should ever tell your child, college is not for you. If there is something they want to do that involves going to college, then I would encourage having them get tested. That's going to probably have to be with a psychologist who is going to give a diagnosis, but then in college they can get help through the Students with Disabilities Center. And I know we don't really like that word, but and that might not even be what it's called, but they can get help at school if they do have a diagnosis that they're going in with. So that helps them. And the other thing is just a lot of times when dyslexic students get out of school, it opens the doors for them to really pursue the things that they are really, really good at. So, all along the way, you just want to be supporting those interests and developing those talents, as well as giving them the tools, the technology, that will help them along the way.
Wonderful. I'm glad I asked because I was just thinking, I was like, we might have some mamas with kids going off to college and being a little worried about how that piece fits in. So thank you.
Mhm.
Oh, well, I'm excited to hear about what you're offering our mamas, Jill. So you want to tell us about your freebie?
Well, what I'm going to encourage people to do is go to our website, stowellcenter.com/newsletter. That is the portal that it does sign you up for our newsletter, which gives you free resources and things, but also it allows you to get into the free resources section of our website, where we have dyslexia accommodations. We have a whole packet of dyslexia accommodations. So if you are working with a teacher or you have a 504 plan, these accommodations are helpful. You can get a free copy of my book, At Wit's End, A Parent's Guide to Ending the Struggle, Tears, and Turmoil of Learning Disabilities. We have an executive function cheat sheet, which I know learning how to, in the moment, help your students develop executive function skills is a big thing that, people are always looking for, and just lots of practical tools for parents. So stowellcenter.com/newsletter will get you into that space.
Beautiful. It's always awesome when you're offering more than just one thing, Jill. So thank you. It sounds like there's plenty of things to choose from. And I know some of our mamas would be like, yes, I want it all. So thank you. All right. Well, I've loved our interview, Jill, and I think that's a perfect place to wrap it up, unless there's anything else you'd like to talk about.
Well, I hope you all have a really good school year. And if you haven't started your school year yet, just set up some routines, or even at the very beginning of the school year, set up some routines from the very beginning, structure around things that everybody agreed on together is very helpful.
I love that. Routines. That's one of the things, yes, I talk about an organization. And then I
Yep.
just realized, Jill, I didn't ask you for your socials and things. I know you gave your website, and I'll make sure that links down below for the freebie, but are there certain platforms our mamas should look for you on?
We are on all the platforms. No thanks to me, but thanks to our social media manager. We're on all the platforms. The one that I would say could really be helpful specifically is our YouTube channel. And we have a podcast and over 100 broadcast episodes with professionals around the country to help students with mental health, executive function, learning challenges, and it's really for parents. So it's called LD Expert, and that is our YouTube channel that I think would be really helpful.